7th, 2021, and to give us our first taste, the PS5 now has the Maiden demo, a small slice of what we can expect from the latest in the series. Built, of course, using an updated version of the RE engine, you'll get a taste of what you can expect for next-gen Resident Evil as you escape a dungeon, enter a creepy mansion, and face off against one of the daughters of the Countess. Seeing Village plans to feature a larger open world the designers consider a character in itself, multiple enemies you'll face off against in packs, I'm left feeling both excited, but it leaves me wondering how the engine will keep up after seeing the Maiden demo does indeed dip at points to sub 4K 60fps. I have some theories on how they'll address this, which I'll get to in just a moment. First, it should be noted that the demo focuses on the character they call the Maiden, but in Resident Evil Village you'll once again be in the shoes of Ethan Winters as Chris Redfield turns his life upside down. You'll encounter enemies who wield weapons, travel in packs, and you'll interact with villagers just trying to survive the day. I predict it not going well for them. This is going to be taxing on the engine if the demo is lurching already, so how could they offer a smoother experience? Producer Peter Fabiano did state that the demo doesn't feature combat or the blocking mechanics, so I'd imagine that this is their chance to show off the engine graphically, and it is quite impressive, but obviously they will adjust as necessary for the full release. And we'll get another look at what they do with a separate new demo coming sometime this spring on all platforms. But back to Maiden. I opened talking about those 60 frames per second dips in combat, but you have to remember that nearly the entire Maiden demo does run at a locked 60 frames per second at native 4K resolution, which is incredibly impressive. But as Maiden doesn't feature a lot of action, it's clearly a technical showcase highlighting what they've been able to do with lighting, resolution, and art direction with a few scares here and there. I've seen this FPS issue brought to light by many on social media already, so how will they handle those dips? Well, during TGS 2020, director Morisama Sato pointed out that he is more concerned with the moment-to-moment experience, stating that he's focused on what do I want to make people feel and win. To accomplish this, the plan is to work with the team to make the appropriate visuals to convey those things. The RE engine used here has also been used for Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Devil May Cry 5, but for Resident Evil Village and this Maiden demo, the RE engine has been optimized for next-generation consoles. I think we got a peek of what it can do with the recent Devil May Cry 5 push to 120 FPS on Series X and PS5. With that context, I'd imagine that for this demo, subtle dips to 50 frames per second are okay. Looking forward to those massive open areas, I'd imagine the team will utilize dynamic resolution scaling as they have in the past, and dip that base resolution down to 1800p to keep it looking as nice as possible while locking around 60 frames per second. Devil May Cry 5 released earlier this year with next-gen optimizations that allowed it to push all the way up to 120 FPS, so I think that they can solve for this in the coming months. In addition to the frame rate, this demo also features other impressive qualities like subtle ray tracing, which can be noticed on the marbled floors, and according to art director Tomonori Takano, the lighting is completely different from RE7, which they take the opportunity to show off in the first area you'll see after escaping the dungeon. It's really quite beautiful and somehow still exquisitely sinister at the same time. The one aspect that caught me off guard, which I think is an easy fix, was the low texture quality on the doors. You'll notice it when you get close to them, and as they're a staple of the series, with danger lurking just beyond, I hope they get to address it, as they're currently looking a bit muddy. Other than that, the demo sets a lofty expectation for the full release of Village. For previous generation consoles, and noting Digital Foundry's original findings here, Resident Evil 7 targeted 1080p at 60 frames per second and hit around 40 to 60 FPS. But the Xbox One X did hit native 4K at 60 with the PS4 Pro running around 1800p at 60 frames per second. Fast forward to Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3, where both handled frame rate amazingly well and set a bar for expectations on those platforms. Village is developed with next-gen consoles and PC in mind, but the goal is to bring similar satisfying experiences to players on PS4 and Xbox One, according to director Tsuyoshi Kanada. With their history in mind, I would be surprised to see anything less than what they've already shown is their standard of quality. When it's all said and done, this demo really impressed me. Consoles and PC in mind, but the goal is to bring similar satisfying experiences. It gave me a good excuse to dive into all the Resident Evil Village trailers, learn more about the RE engine, and listen to what the developers have said about Village so far. Any engine that can push native 4K at 60 frames per second with ray tracing with HDR lighting is going to knock your socks off if the jump scares don't do it first. I cannot wait to see what launch has in store for the series. I'm your host, Destin, and if you've watched this far, thank you for watching. For more on all things gaming, keep it right here on IGN.
They're coming again! PlayStation.
Cold to change out here. Dang, I'm late for Mom's rally.
Subway card, check. You got the house key?
Yeah, I got it.
Come on! We're gonna be late! Hey! Dude, I am so filling your suit with snow. Are you still wearing your suit?
Yeah, you know, just in case.
It's gonna be fine. See, this is my favorite part of living in Harlem. Pop-up street fair, best food in the city, awesome music.
Man, this would be great for the last beat I was working on. I should get back into mixing.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Any Japanese host may now enjoy Marines.
What do you think about Rio Morales? You gonna vote for her?
Still hard to think of Mom as a politician. She's been a teacher my whole life.
Similar skill sets, right? Corralling people, educating them, making sure they don't throw things at each other.
Hi, I'm Brian Horton, Creative Director at Insomniac Games. We're excited to show you this first look at gameplay from Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Our story picks up 1 year after the events of the first game, and we find Miles' new home, Harlem, is in danger. Trouble brews while Miles' mom, Rio Morales, leads an election rally. A war between the devious energy corporation Roxxon and the Underground, a high-tech criminal army led by the Tinkerer, starts to break out. In this gameplay sequence, captured on PlayStation 5 hardware, the Underground attacks Roxxon, sending the rally into chaos in a fight that spills onto the Braithwaite Bridge, where the Underground tries to steal Roxxon's experimental energy source, Nuform. Let's take a look.
Go, go, go! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Let's not shoot each other, all right?
We're after the new form. Ignore everything else. Get rid of him. Then grab as much as you can carry. Keep him busy.
That bridge is coming down! I have to stop this! People are trapped over there! I have to push past these guys! Where is he? Kill you! Don't let him shot you! Help! Help! No. The bus! Get off! Everybody get out! Don't worry, I got you! Thank you. Man! Those people! They're trapped! I've got an idea! I need something they can cross! I can stop this! A little closer!
Spider-Man Miles Morales isn't just a port of the PS4 version. It's a testament to what the future of gaming can be on the PlayStation 5. Pushing Insomniac's proprietary engine with ray tracing at almost every turn, a nearly locked frame rate across both modes, impressively detailed surface maps and textures, and in fidelity mode, it's all at native 4K. Everything in Spider-Man Miles Morales shows that Insomniac hasn't been resting on their laurels and have instead been pushing their engine's technology to the next level, putting the PS5 to the test. One it passes with ease. This is my technical analysis of Spider-Man Miles Morales. It's been impressive seeing what the first games can do on these new consoles, and one of the newer pieces of technology that's getting a lot of buzz, and rightfully so, is ray tracing. And in Spider-Man Miles Morales, it is everywhere. It's on buildings, in puddles, on cars, and it's even turned on when you enter photo mode on the PS5.
This is crazy tech.
There is no escaping it on this next-gen console, and it's truly stunning. It does so much to make New York appear that much more breathtaking. The technology they used in the past was largely screen-space reflections, and it works well for the PS4 Pro, standard PS4, and even the performance mode. But when you start looking at the PS5 fidelity mode side by side with even the PS5's performance mode, you get an idea of what you're missing out on with it turned off. It does a tremendous job of making each scene pop. As a person who's always preferred a higher frame rate, this is one game where you might find yourself truly torn. I've placed the fidelity mode side by side with the 60 FPS performance mode here and slowed it all down to 20% speed to show the difference. There's a true fluidity that you simply lose out on when zipping across New York City on fidelity mode. Selfishly, I want it all, but at the end of the day, this isn't a game where you need the frame rate to enjoy it. You should definitely give it a try for web slinging, but it drops the visuals like ray tracing while still keeping much of the impressive lighting improvements only available on the PlayStation 5. From my measurements, performance mode is doing a great job at keeping close to native 4K with dimensions around 1728p, and I found a few higher, so you're not losing much resolution for the frame rate. But ray tracing, when you're on the ground or in an internal area, it just pops right out and wows you. Here's what Insomniac's core technology director Mike Fitzgerald had to say about their 60 FPS performance mode and the choice it gives players.
So we have a temporal solution that we've used for a number of years. And yeah, it's a frame-to-frame temporal method, and we use lots of information about where things are on the screen, how fast they're moving. And that lets us upscale very nicely to 4K. We have a really good method of blending between the resolutions when they flip, so you don't notice it. What that lets us do is really prioritize the frame rate over the resolution. I think the performance mode can go up to just under a full 4K, and then yes, down into the 1700s. We've heard so much of, it's a really hard decision, but I think that's probably a good thing because it means we're giving different options for different, types of players. You hear some people are like, I'm definitely doing the ray tracing thing, and others are saying, no, I'm definitely doing the 60 frames per second thing. And so it's nice.
SSR, or screen space reflections, are still used on all the other platforms, and it's implemented quite well. One place all modes use that is on the water, and you'd have to be looking really close to see the reflections disappear in the distance as you're zipping past at 70 miles an hour. And on windows, the cube maps as you climb up are slightly more noticeable, as on occasion they won't reflect something like the giant Avengers building behind me. But again, you don't notice any of this unless you're making an analysis video like I am, so the SSR does a ton to make up for what you're missing out on at higher frame rates, or on older consoles. Speaking of frame rates, that same 33 millisecond and double frame issue crops up again, and it's present on all versions of Spider-Man, even the PS5 version at native 4K, and on performance mode. Here's what Insomniac had to say about this frame rate issue.
One thing we do is we're really careful about camera cuts. We want to make sure you don't see cloth pops and things settling and things popping in afterwards, or any of the simulation type stuff that you usually do frame to frame. We don't want to do the camera cut and then have things be in a bad state, right? So a lot of what we do is pre-camera cut, simulate all the cloth in the scene for an extra frame or two, let some lighting settle and try and do it all behind the scenes before we show another one. And I bet there's some cuts in there where there's, we've ramped up a lot of the amount of cloth we're using in the game and stuff like that. And I'm almost certain that's what is happening there.
And while you see these flutters in my analysis, it's literally one frame between camera cuts, and it's nearly imperceptible during gameplay on all platforms. The thing that surprised me even more is that from the base PS4 up through the PS5, they've achieved an almost locked 30 frames per second when you're web slinging in the open world, and if you choose to play at 60 FPS on the PS5, it's going to be locked at 60, and it's going to stay there. But if one platform struggled to stay there, it was the base PS4. The color range seems to be quite reduced, and while web slinging through the open world, you only saw minor drops that you don't notice as you play, but they're there, so I'm calling them out. Regardless, no matter what platform you would play on, it seems that Insomniac has pushed every pixel they can to give you the best experience your hardware can offer, and that deserves kudos. If you're playing on the PS5, native 4K at 30 frames per second is simply stunning. Here's what Insomniac had to say about developing for the PS4 versus the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, so part of our work on this game was building in a robust sort of scaling system to have stuff run on all the different types of hardware. We have a lot of PS4 players on the base PS4, on the PS4 Pro, and we really wanted this game to be an awesome example of, tech on that hardware as well, and not only look at the PS5. The PS5 let us do more dynamic lights, obviously the ray tracing stuff that it's been focused on, but really just more nuanced dynamic lighting in general. And our lighting artists spent a lot of time in there saying, okay, we can turn these ones on for the Pro and these ones on for the 5. And okay, we need to compensate with this on the 4 if we don't have that in. And then HDR comes up, so there's all these different combinations of things. And we have some tools to help them manage that.
Diving into some other technical aspects of Spider-Man, we can take a look at the character models on the PS5, which promise to have improved skin shading and spline-based hair, so it moves more naturally.
Actually, the fur coat that Miles has on the subway in the opening is a really good example of this. That actually uses all this strand hair, and as you watch him walk around, you can see all the strands simulated.
The city also has several improvements, including more characters on screen at any given time and a longer draw distance. I was able to catch their LOD system in action at a few points, like on this long city street. Their system is quite genius, actually, as they revealed what's going on the PS4 version. The further away you get from the camera, the lower the level of detail gets for everything. If you happen to be walking along the ground and you squint, you'll notice it, like with these buildings in the distance that transform to a higher level of detail as you get closer. In addition, another genius tactic is how they delay loading the higher resolution items and things that aren't needed as you swing through the city. It's all delayed in the pipeline as you're swinging, but when you land, it all starts loading in, as outlined during their GDC talk. But as a normal player, you don't notice any of this happening, and that's by design. It's kind of the magic of what Insomniac does. The added motion blur, chromatic aberration, and film grain all works together to make the game look more like a film. And now they've continued adding to all that with ray tracing, improved character models, and new technology on the PS5 that allows them to expand what they can render in any given scene. And the loading times are next to nothing when compared with older platforms. So all that means more textures, more people, more cars, more tech, and higher levels of detail in each scene. I will say this though, no matter what platform you play on, even the base PS4, the game runs quite well, but the PS5 fidelity option should not be missed, especially if you want to see everything an engine like this can do for an open world game. The frame rate option is also impressive. Insomniac nailed everything here. Spider-Man Miles Morales sets an impressive standard for open world games on the PlayStation 5, and all the other platforms. This is my second performance analysis piece for IGN, and I hope you liked it. I've been working to make better comparisons for IGN, so if you like this one, consider checking out my look at Gears 5 and the technology they've implemented to make it run at 4K 60 frames per second with the Xbox Series X. These take a ton of time and research for me to do, so with all honesty, just thank you for watching. Stay tuned for my next performance analysis across both next-gen platforms, where we'll focus on a certain Megaton shooter I'm sure you all love.
While supply shortages continue to restrict entry into the next console generation, those lucky enough to secure a PS5 have a solid launch window lineup to explore. To help you sort through all the best games currently available on the system, that includes cross-generation and PS4 games that look and play even better on the PS5, these are the 10 best games to play on the system right now. Ghost of Tsushima on PS4 offers something for both players who have already played through Jin's journey and those who have yet to enjoy Sucker Punch's stunning vision of feudal Japan. Now running at a Sakai steel sharp 60 frames per second, Ghost's already thrilling combat has never felt better, and its unmatched photo mode is a joy to use. Plus, there's now the free Legends update to play through, which culminates in a visually striking and challenging raid that's one of the best co-op experiences available on the PS5 at launch. Revisiting 2018's God of War on PS5 is an absolute must, and if you somehow missed out on it on PS4, there's no better way to experience it for the first time. While the PS5 doesn't overhaul the visuals or add any new effects like ray tracing, the stable 60 frames per second it runs in on performance mode makes combat even more of a joy than it already was, though you will have to settle for the experience in 1080p. Even so, the action is still as satisfying as ever, and its world and story remain some of the best that gaming has to offer.
We're gonna fight that?
We have no choice.
While Sackboy: A Big Adventure foregoes the creation side of the Little Big Planet series, its focus on being a fun, charming platformer pays off in a delightful adventure that can be played both solo or co-op. Sumo Digital's level variety keeps things fresh, so one moment you're riding a train through a moving level that has you occasionally jumping off to grab collectibles, while the next you're grooving through a level set to Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk. Yes, really. And as with most games we've seen on PS5, it's a visual treat.
So what you say? Ready to make history? Of course you are.
The Pathless marries a simple but elegant and completely engrossing movement mechanic with a gorgeous open world. Running, jumping, and gliding through developer Giant Squid's forests, rocky plateaus, and snow-capped mountains is a treat thanks to the main bow and arrow gameplay relying less on precision accuracy and more on empowering you to carve a fun path through the terrain. It's a world that encourages exploration and satisfies your curiosity, making the destinations you reach as fun as the journey itself thanks to a host of clever puzzles. Add in a handful of boss battles that are part epic chase scene and part Zelda-esque showdown, all backed by a moving epic score, and you've got one of the most intriguing launch titles on the PS5. Developer Young Horses continues its absurdist streak with Bugsnax, an environmental/creature-based puzzle game that has you snapping photos and catching tasty critters. Underneath Bugsnax's cute and quirky exterior is a heartwarming story full of ominous twists and turns as you try to rebuild a settlement by fulfilling folks' requests. Each returned resident means another person to interview for the story you're writing about Bugsnax, Snacktooth Island, and, ultimately, what happened to Elizabeth Megafig, who invited you to the island to begin with. Its progression systems continue to pique our curiosity too, which makes the gameplay loop enticing throughout. And Bugsnax's big reveal, no spoilers we promise, doesn't disappoint.
Oh baby, what a bridge!
Marvel's Spider-Man was already one of the best superhero games ever made, but the PS5 remaster elevates it to a new level. Insomniac's visual update brings the look of the adventure up to par with the brand new Miles Morales. The addition of ray tracing with 4K resolution and HDR support makes any time of day so beautiful that you'd be forgiven for forgetting this wasn't running on code originally developed for the PS5. Add in the quality of life improvements Spidey got post-launch, new accessibility options, photo mode updates, and all the DLC episodes. This is the definitive way to play one of the PS4's best games. The DualSense is one of the most defining characteristics of the PS5, as the nuanced haptic feedback and strategically used adaptive triggers create a level of immersion that feels genuinely special. Nowhere is that tech better showcased than in Astro's Playroom, which is, quite literally, designed to show off the capabilities of the DualSense controller. But this would-be tech demo is also a fantastic game in its own right, with a delightful set of worlds to explore that all celebrate a different facet of the PS5 and the different eras of PlayStation software and hardware. Astro's Playroom reminds players why they love PlayStation while giving them a reason to fall in love all over again. Its solid platforming, fun environmental puzzles, and enticing set of collectibles will have you gunning for the platinum and getting it in no time. Assassin's Creed Valhalla has redefined the rules of the franchise yet again with the ability to sack monasteries, build up your budding Norse settlement, and uncover unique gear and powerful abilities. The PS5 beautifully captures the icy mountains of Norway and the bending rivers of England alike in stunning 4K, and the ability to travel between the war-torn kingdoms quicker than you can sound the horn for a raiding party remains impressive throughout. Bluepoint Games had some high expectations to meet with the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls. Not only was it an anticipated remake of a beloved and landmark game, but also the first major showcase of what a dedicated PS5 exclusive game could look like. Fortunately, Bluepoint delivered, and Demon's Souls is not only jaw-droppingly gorgeous, but it's also incredibly faithful to the source. It's handling one of the deepest, richest, and most challenging experiences currently found on the console. Though not a full-blown sequel, this standalone follow-up sends Peter Parker on vacation and leaves his young spider apprentice Miles Morales to look after New York. Building on the rock-solid foundations of Insomniac's first game, New York has been gorgeously blanketed with snow, holiday cheer, and next-gen polish. Our hero has a few more spider powers at his disposal than Peter Parker did, and these are cleverly adapted into new gameplay mechanics that, while they don't reinvent the wheel, they put enough of a spin on it to make it feel fresh, sometimes literally thanks to the DualSense controller. It doesn't feature as lengthy of a campaign or as many colorful villains as 2018's Spider-Man, but Miles Morales' story has just as much charm and heart as its predecessor, possibly more. Its tagline of "Be Greater" set a high bar, but Miles Morales somersaults over it with ease. Those are our favorite games to play on the PS5 so far, but we'll be updating our list as more are released this year. For everything else PlayStation, stay right here at IGN.
You ever feel like you're just waiting for a sign? To do that thing you've always meant to do. Sometimes I feel like I'm just standing on the edge of doing great things. But something's holding me back. Maybe it's just nerves. Maybe it's the fear that I'll never be as good as what I imagine, when I'm still just standing on the edge. But if we've got nothing else to lose, might as well jump.
PlayStation.
Captain, I've got eyes on a Fisk construction site and their equipment's covered in dust.
Just there for show?
That's my bet. I'm gonna take a closer look.
They think the boss can't run things from inside?
What I hear is true. Pretty soon Osborn's gonna wish he'd remembered who his friends are.
Keep an eye out for Spider.
Heads up.
Sweet dreams.
Come on! Doesn't take a genius to know who did this. How's he doing that? Everyone down! I'm gonna blow your brains out. I hate this crap!
Keep him on the ground or we don't stand a chance.
PlayStation. PlayStation.
Remedy love time, bullet, travel or otherwise. In Control you again can defy the laws of physics and even time itself. But the last gen Northlight engine was a hungry hippo on those base consoles. Now that brand new hardware has landed in the SX and the PS5, the shackles are off for some unbridled ray tracing or 60 FPS action. Or just one of those on the S. The question is though, how much pain for that gain? Let's find out. The three consoles in question all have one mode in common, a performance mode that targets a buttery smooth 60Hz update, double that of all console releases prior. The Series S comes in with a 1600 by 900p target resolution, fixed and not dynamic from all my counts. Now unsurprisingly, ray tracing is not possible here, largely due to memory constraints. Both the X and the 5 stretch their pixel pouches to 2560 by 1440, again appear fixed in both modes. Using Northlight temporal A8 reconstruction, it pushes that up to a 4K output, and we first saw this temporal A8 in Quantum Break, but here, like other parts of the engine, it has been updated or tweaked for that next round of hardware. It has a great deal of weight to carry thanks to the game's art style and its strong specular highlights, contrasting tones, thin lines and abundant SSR or ray traced reflections. It delivers a confident equilibrium of maintaining texture detail sharpness but reducing the sub-pixel temporal stability, even in movement, something you do a great deal of. It's not the best we've seen, with some areas becoming quite noisy, and they can break up worse on the Series S. That reconstructed nature of the ray trace reflections can be noticed here in photo mode, or just looking at it in glass. You notice that delayed trail as you move the camera, and that resolution breaks down to its base, and then when you stop it catches up, and that previous frame converges with the current frame into a fuller, cleaner object. Something similar in the rasterized image also, that uses that temporal AA to reconstruct the image back up to 4K. The ray tracing is very effective, with an excellent combination of surface normals, microfacet distortion, with a good roughness cutoff using stochastic samples within marble, metals and brass surfaces. Something the lower ray trace reflections on consoles can actually help with at times, making the surface look more realistic with a little rougher, more diffuse surface level than the higher, shinier level on PC with its better quality ray trace reflections. But even the Fresnel, the expensive Fresnel in transparent reflections, is factored in, with oblique glancing angles heightening her reflection and then fading away into the objects behind as that angle of incidence is reduced. They look great, and the BV8 structure does hold a great deal of objects. These are all dynamically allocated at certain sector points, it seems. The curvature of objects is also factored into the reflection, giving accurate distortion. You can see this on chairs, bins, and every reflective surface that has a specular level above a certain roughness reflects everything around, and this helps with things like bounce lighting or the colour of the floor bouncing up on tables and metal legs and chairs. Now, these can be cooled within a shorter range of the camera frustum, and occasionally are loaded without a base albedo map within, but these are rare on the objects within the BVH. The blend of the reflective surface diffuse colour also factors into that reflection, which all adds to the excellent physically based materials the game has. Ray tracing simply adds a great deal to these moments when you have time to notice. I must note though, the SX has some issues on that BVH level, being lost when it appears to be frustum aligned, causing your character to disappear at points or flutter past like an 80s pop video. Minor, but it is present. I tried this on the PS5, but this never occurred, so it seems to be specific to the DXR API the Xbox uses and not an inherent Northlight engine issue. I also tested this on PC, and the other issue you can notice here is you get dual reflections on the PS5 in these ray trace reflections on glass when there is two surfaces, the glass itself at the front and then those brass strips behind, so you get a double reflection in this mirror. You do not get that on the Xbox or even the PC version, so again, that does point to a little difference in terms of how they're utilizing that Northlight engine and the specific API that's being used on the PS5 around ray tracing. But generally, they are very similar across the board, and as you can see with the reflections here, the PC version on the same medium settings, which I've compared here with my RTX 2070 overclock, so it's more like a 2070 Super. The level of detail, the draw distance of those BVH objects, everything is pretty much identical. The only difference is the PC version runs at a higher resolution, probably around double, but it's hard to spot in action. But when you're staring into the screen, that breakdown as the camera moves is obviously less apparent. And to wrap this section up, we can actually have a quick test using the photo mode for that ray trace reflections on the consoles. When you go to photo mode, it unlocks the frame rate, so we can see beyond that 30 FPS cap that this mode has. A quick test here in this room with high reflectance, lots of specular roughness levels, and a large BVH grid of objects in the background gives us a little bit of a delta test. Don't take this as gospel, but it is a good test. What you can see here is that this scene, spinning the camera around in the same spot in this room, the Series X holds a locked 60, not dropping one single frame, whereas the PS5 can dip somewhere between 16% and 5% delta as the camera moves around. Now remember, this is not the same as playing the game. There's no dynamic objects, there's no explosions, there's no CPU load at all really, there's no data being streamed in and out, so it's not really indicative of how the game would look. But on a pure rasterization and then ray tracing level, it does give us a view under the hood in terms of how the hardware is handling ray tracing, and that's because the more CUs and more TMUs, irrespective of clock speed, does point to the fact that the Series X should be better slightly at ray tracing, and this test proves it. But again, there's more to discuss around the APIs, the construction, and just how the ray tracing is working, but it's a good test nonetheless. Just as a quick comparison as well, comparing this to my 2070 Super, again on the same settings I can compare with consoles, again those reflections factored in, spinning the camera around in photo mode in the exact same spot. Then the PS5 is slightly faster than the 2070 Super, and the Series X is obviously faster than them both. So it does give you a good example of just how good these consoles are already at doing ray trace reflections across multi-platform titles like this.
Call me Jesse. Okay, Jesse, full lockdown. It seems to have spread everywhere and to everyone not protected by an HRA. And, extraordinarily, you. You are the director, and that makes you special by definition.
Trench is dead. Shot.
Ah.
Worth it though in comparison to the other modes, higher frame rate and much faster input times. And obviously on the S this is all you've got. While it will depend on your preference, once ray tracing is off, the game defaults to screen space reflections, which often seem more stochastic than the ray trace ones do, and they do not benefit as much from that TAA. In action though, it can be harder to notice the loss, with only certain points in the game which lack those decent cube maps to fall back on. These can stand out at times. Now instead the game uses sign distance fields, almost like a point cloud approximation of the surrounding geometry, and these blend with the SSR reflections on rougher marble floors or brushed metal doors, and they actually come close enough to convince. But when you need to check your hair and lippy, they do not hold a candle to ray tracing, obviously. And again though, like Quantum Breaker-like combat, it really benefits from that 16 millisecond frame cost reduction, as do the input times. That 60 mode feels so much better than ray tracing mode, and at times I actually struggle to play over the 60 mode, as it may or may not affect you though. This might be different for you personally, but for me I definitely felt the difference. Which nicely brings us into performance and how all versions stack up. Now, as noted, the last gen versions target the same 30 FPS the ray trace mode does, but with lesser effects and no ray tracing. The new ray tracing mode on both consoles is vastly better and cleaner, if not that much better on input times, but holding that 33 millisecond frame time pretty much all the time on the PS5, and it does that most of the time on the Series X. Except there are those deltas coming from those streaming stutters when you move into new sector points rather than in gameplay, although sometimes it can happen as you're moving around the combat area. Now this is obviously largely helped by the PS5's I/O construction. It's alleviated workloads away from the CPU and that SSD. Something else the PS5 boost is almost half the install size thanks to Oodle texture compression. It only takes 25 gigabytes on your PS5 versus 42 gigabytes on both Xbox machines. Now all versions include the DLC pack as well, and this translates to a smaller footprint, hardly any stutters at all, or practically none, with minor ones, but they can crop up more often than I would like on the Xbox, along with slightly faster loading times on the Xbox Series X. Again minor, but every little help. But as boring as that 30 FPS mode is from an analysis perspective, it's great news for us as we play. You do get these stutters in the 30 mode and the 60 mode on the Series X, and I'll touch on what I think is happening there in a minute. But the 60 FPS mode has slightly more to discuss, not least of which is that Series S version. The game itself targets 60 FPS, but again it's locked at 1600 by 900, and it does appear to have some reductions in some of the textures and details and filtering. Not a massive amount, but you can certainly notice it on cutscenes and certain parts when you're comparing them side by side. You can also notice the lower resolution, so it highlights the shimmer, the breakup, and that stochastic noise can get a little bit noisy at certain points, specifically at that lower resolution. On a 4K screen it stands out much more than a 1080p one, but just be aware. But generally it holds on to that 60 FPS very, very well. You can run through areas, and occasionally the stuttering is pretty much identical to the Series X, sometimes worse, sometimes better, but it's really synonymous of the entire game engine running on the hardware and how it's been constructed. The Series S is a pretty consistent 60. There are points when you can have long views, lots of geometry draw and alpha effects that can then bring that frame rate down to a consistent 40 at some of the heavier points you can see on screen, but it never really prolongs for too long, and generally you're somewhere in those mid 50s, so it still feels very fast, very smooth and very consistent. And overall it's a decent rendition of the game minus those ray trace options, but it still has that most important for me, that 60 FPS mode. Moving into the Series X and the PS5, the comparison here again is pretty close. They largely dip occasionally, very minor 33 millisecond skips into the next refresh cycle when explosions happen close on, or physics collide, or objects are very heavy in the screen, and that frustum is filled with effects, alphas and transparencies. That can cause a couple of dips down, but they're not that far apart in this fully rasterized mode. Maybe ever so slightly better to the Series X, but you wouldn't notice it outside this comparison. The unfortunate thing, flipping the ray tracing test on its head, is there is consistent stutters and judders at points throughout the game. Again, consistent in when you traverse the game, when you run through it. Most of the combat sections, once they're loaded in, stay consistent at that 60 FPS. When you're travelling through areas, you can get these stutters you can see here, and that can bring the frame rate down to somewhere into the low 40s. It can be very brief, and it judders as it goes through those sections, and again, this can be frustrating at times if you sometimes get it compounded on top of each other, and you feel it far more often than these 1 or 2 frame drops throughout combat. So it is the worst performing title because of the fact it dips down in these levels, which is a shame. But why is it doing this? Now, it's not because of that magic SSD, it's not because of all of those things that I've just spoke about in terms of the IO construction specifically. Now, what I think it is an answer we can find over on the PC version. The Northlight engine is a very impressive engine. It's almost a perfect technical showcase of all the things the tech engineers want to push into a title. Ray trace reflections, huge physics, destruction, fluid-based simulation on alpha effects, so many particles and much more going on, that actually it's still a CPU-bound title often, specifically in those ray tracing modes, because that puts a much higher overhead on the CPU, but also in the game itself. It can be bound to one single thread. Not an unknown, many titles are multi-threaded, but you have a worker thread that owns the rest of the game engine. And here on PC, you can see on my Ryzen 2700, just defaulting here to 3300, you can see it can max out 100% at times on one single thread. Now, unless Remedy have made drastic changes to this construction and single-threaded limitation, which I highly doubt in the new Northlight release here, then it's probably an issue that carries over to the console versions. But because of that PS5's construction and the fact that pretty much everything to do with moving data in and out of load of RAM is actually taken away from the CPU, in addition to the API being slightly lighter on that console than the DirectX version on Xbox, then likely these issues are not hitting it where they are hitting it on the Series X and the Series S. Hence, we get these brief but occasional stutters that crop up when things are instantiated into RAM, objects are drawn in, areas are closed off for kill rooms, and that's a standard practice of engines to keep data moving freely in and out of RAM, and there is a cost to that. Now, bearing in mind that when you use ray tracing, that also increases the cost of the CPU. So that BVH grid, that construction of objects that are in different boxes that are then scanned when the ray tracing goes out from the screen, all of this has a factor on the game. So if we take the comparison earlier on the photo mode, that had no load on the game at all, just general ray tracing and rasterization loads. Perfect GPU test. And this is the thing about the game. It's a great example of how these two consoles actually differ and strengthen in different areas. You can lose 16, maybe 20% in ray trace modes on the PS5, but you can lose exactly the same 16, 20% in these points when it's loading data in and out in combat. And it's quite refreshing to see a game that enables us to get a good view into the hardware and how it's constructed. But generally, that 60 FPS mode on all consoles is the one that I would choose. I'm not a big fan of the art style. I think it's a bit dull. I don't think it utilises the ray trace reflections very well, and it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't recommend the ray trace reflections for me, because I don't think they stand out unless you're staring into the screen and looking at them. But if you are a fan, I think there's a secret third option here for Remedy to just turn on. Based on our tests previously between the consoles and PC, I think a 1080-60 mode would be perfectly capable on both machines, with likely a very similar performance metric to that rasterization mode. But if you want to run around, shoot things, pick objects up, and then check your lippy, it might be the perfect compromise to get the most out of Control. If you like this and these deep dives into these performance analysis across consoles and that powerful PC, then obviously keep it IGN, and I'll catch you on the next one.
some very unexpected developments in your future. Shocking events that will change the course of your life!
That last part might have been a hair dramatic, but there's lots of awesome updates and additions coming to the Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time experience on PlayStation 5. Hey everyone, I'm Lou Studdard, creative producer at Toys for Bob. I'm here to give you the feature rundown on Crash Bandicoot 4 on PS5. That includes 4K at 60 frames per second, adaptive triggers, 3D audio, and more.
Let's make this fun.
Picking up where Crash Bandicoot Warp left off, in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, we find the evil masterminds Neocortex and Dr. Entropy escaping a once-thought inescapable interdimensional prison, leaving giant holes in the universe. What follows is a mind-bending adventure for Crash and his marsupial pals. We designed Crash Bandicoot 4 to leap off your screen, brimming with bold, vibrant environments and characters. Crash Bandicoot has always looked pretty suave, but wait until you see him spinning heads in native 4K at 60 frames per second. With the weight of the universe on your shoulders, and probably some errands to run, there's little time to wait on loading screens. The DualSense wireless controllers bring adaptive triggers to your fingertips, so you can feel the blast of Neocortex's DNA-changing ray gun, or feel the grip when you grapple Atana's hookshot. Hold on tight when you feel the boost of Crash's jetboard, and really feel the suck when you vacuum his Dingodile. Looking to get fully immersed in the Crash Bandicoot universe? Crank it up to 11 and take your audio into an all-new dimension with enhanced 3D audio. Achieving the infamous 106% completion is the sign of a true Bandicoot master. But should our genetically mutated marsupial lose his way? Leverage PlayStation 5 activity cards to track your progress and hit your goals for things like time trials, flashback levels, and boss fights. I bet Entropy wishes he had that. Even bring your incomplete save over from the PlayStation 4 and use the activity cards to get to 106%. Oh, and one more thing. If you own the PS4 version of the game, an upgrade option is available. Check out the PlayStation blog for full details. Whether it's your first playthrough or your 100th, there's no better time to experience Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time on PlayStation 5.
Welcome back, Crash. The gang's all here on today's new edition of State of Play. We've got some great updates lined up for you. First, let's check out the latest on an eagerly anticipated game coming to the PS5 console this spring from PlayStation Studios.
Hey everyone, we at Housemarque are excited to give you this sneak peek at Returnal. In Returnal, you will play as Celine, an Astra scout, who crash lands on an alien planet, Atropos, after receiving a mysterious signal, White Shadow. Players will explore this inscrutable, dark planet in search for answers and unfold mysteries, which may point to a larger force at play. Dashing and quickly maneuvering your way above and around enemies is key to survival in Returnal. With the large variety of enemies and the vast number of unique movesets each possess, combat situations prove challenging no matter what the circumstances are. Death is only the beginning. Every time you die and restart, the world will change. The map will be different, enemies will appear in new locations and in differing numbers, so you have to think fast and adapt. Here you can see the use of the lightning alt-fire, which is great for crowd control. This is one of many alt-fires that you can acquire in the game. You will stumble across mysterious devices that can grant rewards to the player. These will vary from weapons, consumables, and upgrades, and they can completely change your playstyle and make each cycle feel unique. Besides the intense combat, Returnal also has a deep and engaging narrative, we allow players to piece together the puzzle that is the story of Celine as they venture deeper and deeper into Atropos and into her personal nightmare.
That can't be here.
I think I am reliving my memories in that house, but not fully. They're corroded. Some parts are missing, others seem manufactured. But I can remember the torment, feeling like I was losing my mind. There's no comfort here. No safe space. Exactly as I left it.
Returnal lands on April 30th, and it's developed by the talented team at Housemarque. Next, let's take a closer look at a high-impact new PS4 game called Knockout City.
Hi, I'm Josh from Bellin Studios. We're an indie developer based in upstate New York, and we recently announced Knockout City, a team-based multiplayer action game for PS4 where rival crews settle their scores with epic dodgeball battles. Knockout City is easy to pick up and play, but there's a lot of depth here for those who've got the skills. In our 1v1 face-off mode, you'll go head-to-head in a constantly shrinking battleground, relying on your reflexes and abilities to knock out an opponent. A well-timed catch powers up the ball, making it easier to land a hit. Use trick shots to lob a ball over a ledge or hook it around a corner. Fake a throw to mess up your opponent's timing and knock them out before they can recover. When you're in a tough spot with a ball flying your way, a last-second dodge is the difference between getting knocked out and staying in the fight. Keep your wits about you and outplay your opponent to bring home a win. Let's jump into Team KO, our 3v3 mode. Teamwork makes the dream work in Knockout City. If your crew is outmatched, a well-coordinated team can still dominate. We're playing in Back Alley Brawl, a new map that you'll find in our upcoming crossplay beta. The special ball for this match is the Sniper Ball, which locks onto targets from far across the map and wham! You can take them out before they have a chance to react. Beyond special balls, each map features a unique mechanic. In Back Alley Brawl, you can hop into a tube and make a quick getaway or use them to sneak up on your opponents. Caught empty-handed? You can literally become the ball, a new weapon for your teammate. Or risk it all. Charge up a teammate, launch them high into the air with an ultimate throw, and they'll land in a huge instant KO explosion. The team here at Bellin has been obsessed with building this world over the last 4 years. Knockout City is coming out May 21st, and we'd love your help in our final stretch of development. Rally your crew and sign up for our crossplay beta at knockoutcity.com to play early on PlayStation. See you soon, Brawlers!
Time for something new. Here's your first look at an upcoming PS5 game from the team at Slow Clap. That was the debut of Sifu, coming to the PS5 console later this year. Now let's get an update on Solar Ash, an epic new PS5 adventure from Heart Machine.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Preston, Creative Director of Heart Machine. You might know us as the team behind Hyperlight Drifter. Today, I'm here to show you the first peek at gameplay for our new title, Solar Ash. Solar Ash is a huge, stylish 3D platformer focused on speed, movement, and fluidity. The game is set inside a giant black hole, known as the Ultra Void, which has been consuming everything in its path. You play as Ray, a daring Void Runner who has decided to venture into this terrifying anomaly as a last-ditch effort to save her homeworld. Ray is extremely agile, able to speed across the world with abilities akin to skating. On the ash and clouds, she can quickly cover great distances in our huge world. At its core, Solar Ash is a game about movement, and Ray has everything she needs to flow through the dangerous and unique world. As you journey to save your planet, you'll find yourself face to face with grotesque and violent creatures. Our combat system is simple, fast, and fluid, built to empower players and encourage flow. As you explore the Ultra Void, enemy encounters will scale to greater and greater sizes. Some of these creatures require speed and precise timing to defeat. Ray will eventually need to face the massive sentinels of this void, wretched, starved beasts that hold the key to her quest. Solar Ash is Heart Machine's vision of the adventure platformer. The giant spaces, the feel of movement, the flow of combat, and the high-stakes battles atop enormous beasts all come together to bring players something we think is incredibly unique, and more importantly, fun. This game is a labor of love for everyone on the Heart Machine team. We're excited to bring Solar Ash to PS5 and PS4 later this year.
If you're a fan of scary games, this next one is for you.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
Gregory, we can get you out of here. You and me together. They won't stop hunting you. None of them will stop hunting you. We have to get you out by morning.
You will do as I say. You will bring me what I want. And if you fail me, then you will. Both of you burn!
more going on here than you realize.
That was a chilling new look at Five Nights at Freddy's security breach. Up next, let's take a tour of Oddworld Soulstorm.
Hi, I'm Lauren Lanning, Creative Director at Oddworld Inhabitants. Today, I'm going to take you on a brief tour of our newest game, Oddworld Soulstorm.
They've always known you would come. Do you know why you have?
In Soulstorm, you reprise the role of Abe, accidental hero turned unlikely leader of an emerging revolution, as you do battle through weird and wonderful environments in an effort to escape the all-powerful and eternally greedy Gluckins. We really wanted to bring this world to life with what we call 2.9D platforming, which adds much more depth and immersion for the player. This sense of connection is also reinforced through the use of the DualSense's haptic feedback, as you'll now be able to feel Abe's heartbeat in high alert and suspenseful situations. There are well over 1,000 fellow Mudokons that you must try to save along the way, but they are far more than helpless workers looking to be saved. When used effectively, you'll be able to solve puzzles, harness their combined energy, and be given the tools they need to fight alongside you. And there will be times when the extra hands will be needed as you face off against an array of heavily armed enemies that will stop at nothing to find and end Abe once and for all. In order to stand a chance against this much larger threat, we gave Abe the ability to scavenge, loot, and pickpocket items from his surroundings and use them to craft an impressive arsenal of his own that he can share with others. You can also play as a non-lethal pacifist or an agent of chaos. We wanted you to have the choice. But there is one iconic ability for our shamanic protagonist, Possession. This mystical power allows you to take control of your foes and use their strengths and weapons against them, or use them to gain access to paths still ahead. The Oddworld universe is a diverse place, and this means that there are some environments and situations that require a little more thought, patience, and stealth. You'll find dark and dangerous caves, heavily guarded industrial sites, and ancient forgotten lands. Here, we've built lots of opportunities for you to test your skills and find different ways to handle things. It won't be easy. If being hunted by an army backed by a shady and wealthy organization isn't bad enough, there are also more dangers in the forms of natural obstacles, ancient traps, trials against swarming dark creatures, and industrial hazards that must be dodged, crossed, and avoided. Ultimately, Abe's journey is one of hope, freedom, and truth. There is a rich and engaging narrative to discover in a world full of lies, and we've been able to bring our characters to life like never before. In true Oddworld fashion, your actions in-game will decide the fate of Abe and all those you manage to liberate along the way, and we can't wait to see what you will do.
That was the latest on Oddworld Soulstorm. And here's some exciting news. Active PlayStation Plus members will get the PS5 version for no extra cost, starting in April. Moving on, it's time to catch up with Kena Bridge of Spirits, a gorgeous new adventure we last saw in the June PS5 showcase.
The rats seem quite fond of you. They're usually timid. Something tells me you did not come to our village looking for forest creatures.
Hello, Spirit. I seek passage to the Sacred Mountain Shrine.
Our village is bound to the shrine's energy. But that power faded long ago. Spirits linger here, tangled in the tragedies of our past. You must help these spirits if you wish to reach the mountain shrine.
It's okay. You have to go now.
Move on.
Of a spirit guide is a lonely one.
Now let's settle in for a stylish new look at Deathloop, a PS5 first-person shooter developed by the team at Arcane.
Cole.
What?
You'll never, ever break this loop.
There's no never here. Just you, me, and the rest of these maniacs.
Bring it, baby.
This is Ramblin' Frank's Matinee. This little ditty goes out to the handsome asshole trying to break our loop. Cold, the visionaries are ready to dance. Are you?
Toxic illusion, falling deeper spiral tonight. Static delusion, this is where we do or die. And I've been here before, face to face with the guns, up against all the odds, and I'm the only one. Oh, I've been here before, it must be true. This is
Stay still for like a second.
What the grenade?
Shit! Die already!
You're doomed! Somebody's stealing fights.
Oh, I've been here before, it must be true. This is death. At the beginning of the end again.
Where you been hiding? Boy, do I got a bone to pick with you.
Let's do it again tomorrow.
What to do when the bullet is the same, but the kill is always new.
song's over, people. And so is Ramblin' Frank. The rest of you motherfuckers are next.
Before we leave, how about a huge update for one of 2020's most celebrated games?
Jesse! Barrett!
Where you been?
Tifa! Help me!
Come on, let's push it past the red line! Now it's my turn!
Got to leave the fort right here!
A touching reunion.
Well, guys, your girl finally made it to Midgar. My name is Yuffie, Materia Hunter and Elite Special Forces Operative for the new Wutai government. We'll prove to our common enemy that Wutai is not to be trifled with. Members of Avalanche, we got this.
I'm back.
Ah, there you are. Someone's been expecting you. What took you?
Sorry about that. Anyway, it's nice to meet you. I'm Sonon Kusakabe. Where's Clown?
We lost him.
You what?
He will be okay, though, right?
Well, of course he will.
They're the ones who blew up the reactors. Cool. Should we say hi?
No, better not. After what they've done, you gotta assume Shinra's on their tail.
Look, a Moogle!
Stop! We gotta help.
Should probably get moving.
Got it.
Whatever it is they're planning, you're better off out of it.
They deserve what's coming to them.
Yeah, they do. But I'm not your sister.
There you are.
Who are these jerks?
No clue. They just appeared.
Now, let the hunt begin. Get down here, Merc.
You see that?
That's how ninjas do it.
Yep. That was the reveal of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, coming to the PS5 console later this year. And that's our show. We hope you're as excited as we are for what's to come in 2021. See you next time.
PlayStation.
There you have it, the first PlayStation State of Play of the year. And here to break down everything we just saw is the first next-gen console watch of the week. I'm Damon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by host of our PlayStation podcast, Jonathan Dornbush.
You really threw me for a loop there, Damon. I did not know how you were going to introduce this episode.
I've got to keep you on your toes. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Happy to be here.
I'm having a little bit hard time hearing you as of right now, Ryan, but we'll see if we can get that fixed. Whether you're watching this live right now or if you're watching this when the show normally goes live on Friday mornings, we are going to react and break down everything we just saw from the State of Play, which seems to be mainly focused on smaller games, not too many bigger, large AAA games in there. There's going to be a PS5 version of Final Fantasy VII. We got a little bit more of a look at Deathloop, which is coming up in just a couple of months. The rest is a little bit smaller stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there wasn't anything about Horizon, Forbidden West, God of War, or even Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is coming up in a couple months. So, Jonathan, let's begin with you. What's your sort of takeaway from this State of Play, first State of Play in a long time? What was your first reaction?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple, I think, competing thoughts there for me about how little the first party side of things was there, and we can get to that in a second. I will say I'm very glad the last 6 or so minutes of the State of Play was there, because honestly, for the first 2/3 of it, it wasn't really connecting with me. I was definitely a little let down, I think, about the collection choice there. I think not even maybe pointing to some of those big games, even if they weren't going to be in here, pointing to some of the Ratchet and Clanks of the world may have not been the worst thing to do, to say, like, we'll be showing you some of those more soon. But in the meantime, here's a look at this, especially given we just saw Knockout City at the Nintendo Direct last week, and things of that nature. I think, Solar Ash, looks, that's from the Hyper Light Drifter developers. That looked really great. Opening with Crash was a little strange, given that we know it's coming to PS5 already. That was announced a week or two ago as well. But at least for me in the end, Kena, Bridge of Spirits, Deathloop, bringing us basically a James Bond opening of its own. And